The courtroom was packed that Tuesday morning. Every bench was filled with people, their faces serious, eyes fixed on the 12-year-old boy who walked slowly to the witness stand. His small frame seemed even smaller in the large wooden chair as he looked around nervously. His name was Andre, and today he would testify in the murder trial of his father. Andre wore a blue button-up shirt that his grandmother had ironed that morning. It was a size too big, making him look even younger than his 12 years. His dark eyes, usually bright and curious, were heavy with a sadness no child should know. The defendant, Richard Wilson, a businessman known throughout the city, sat confidently at the defense table. His expensive suit and calm demeanor spoke of someone who expected to walk free. After all, the case against him was mostly circumstantial. Without a solid witness or clear evidence, his high-priced legal team had been picking apart the prosecution's case for days. Andre's father had worked as a maintenance man at Wilson's office building. 3 months ago, he was found dead in the parking garage, supposedly the victim of a robbery gone wrong. But Andre knew different. He had overheard things, seen things that kept him awake at night. The prosecutor, a tired-looking woman with kind eyes, approached Andre gently. "Hello, Andre. Thank you for being here today. I know this is hard." Her voice was soft but clear in the quiet courtroom. Andre nodded slightly, his hands folded tightly in his lap. His grandmother sat in the front row, her face a mixture of pride and worry. "Andre, do you understand what it means to tell the truth under oath?" the prosecutor asked. "Yes, ma'am," Andre replied, his voice small but steady. "It means I promise to God and everyone here that I'll only say what really happened." "That's right," the prosecutor said with a reassuring smile. "Now, can you tell us about the night of April 15th? What did you see or hear?" Andre took a deep breath. He had practiced this with his grandmother and the prosecutor. He needed to be clear and truthful. "I was supposed to be asleep, but I couldn't. Dad had been acting strange for weeks, always on the phone late, looking through papers. That night, I heard him on the phone in the kitchen." "What was he saying?" the prosecutor asked. "He was talking quiet, but I heard him say he had proof now and that he wasn't going to be quiet anymore." Andre's voice grew a little stronger. He said, "The judge needs to know what you've been doing." Then he said something about records and payments. The defense attorney stood up quickly. "Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay." Judge Harold Winters, a man in his 60s with silver hair and cold eyes, looked at Andre for a long moment before saying, "Sustained." The prosecutor nodded and changed direction. "Andre, what happened the next day?" "Dad took me to school like normal, but he seemed happy, like a weight was gone. He told me he was doing something important, that sometimes grown-ups have to stand up when things aren't right, even if it's scary." Andre's eyes filled with tears, but he blinked them back. "That was the last time I saw him alive." The courtroom remained silent. Even the usual shuffling and whispers had stopped. "Did your father mention anyone specific that he was concerned about?" the prosecutor asked carefully. Andre hesitated. His eyes moved from the prosecutor to Wilson, who stared back coldly. Then, almost unconsciously, his gaze drifted to Judge Winters. "He mentioned Mr. Wilson," Andre said, "and he mentioned a judge." Judge Winters tapped his gavel lightly. "Please stick to what your father specifically told you, young man." The prosecutor moved closer. "Did your father leave anything behind? Any papers or recordings that might help us understand what happened?" Andre nodded slowly. "He kept a box under his bed. After he died, I looked through it. There were pictures and papers with numbers. I didn't understand most of it, but I saw Mr. Wilson's name." He paused, his eyes again moving to the judge. The defense attorney stood again. "Your Honor, this is inappropriate. The boy clearly doesn't have direct knowledge of relevant facts." Judge Winters nodded. "I tend to agree. Let's stick to direct observations, not speculation or hearsay." The prosecutor looked frustrated but continued. "Andre, did you see anything unusual on the day your father died?" "No, ma'am. I was at school. But the night before, a car was parked outside our apartment. I saw it from my window. A black car with tinted windows. The same car I've seen at Mr. Wilson's office when Dad took me to work with him sometimes." Wilson shifted in his seat, his confident expression faltering slightly. "Your Honor," the defense attorney began. Judge Winters interrupted, looking at Andre with narrowed eyes. "Young man, are you suggesting that Mr. Wilson was outside your home the night before your father's death?" Andre looked directly at the judge, something changing in his expression. The fear seemed to fade, replaced by a certainty beyond his years. "I'm not suggesting anything about Mr. Wilson right now, Your Honor," Andre said clearly. The courtroom fell completely quiet. Even the court reporter's fingers hovered motionless over her keyboard. "What exactly are you saying?" Judge Winters asked, his voice suddenly tight. Andre sat up straighter in the chair. His grandmother half rose from her seat, sensing what was coming. "I'm saying that when I looked through my dad's box, I found pictures of you and my dad at the same place, some hunting cabin, and there were papers with your name on them too." "Bank papers?" Gasps filled the room. The prosecutor looked shocked. This wasn't part of their preparation. Judge Winters's face reddened. "That's enough! This is not—" "Dad told me that if anything ever happened to him, I should look in that box and make sure the right people saw what was inside," Andre continued, his voice growing stronger. "The night he died, he called me from work and said he was going to talk to the judge the next day. He sounded scared." "This is outrageous," Judge Winters said, banging his gavel. "This testimony is completely—" "You're the killer," Andre said suddenly, his voice cutting through the noise like a knife. The words hung in the air. Every eye in the courtroom turned to Judge Winters, whose face had gone from red to white in seconds. "You met with my dad 2 days before he died. I have the pictures. He told my neighbor, Ms. Patterson, where he was going. She drove him there because his car was broken." Andre's words came faster now. "You're the one who told Mr. Wilson about what my dad knew. You're the one who made sure my dad wouldn't talk." Complete silence filled the courtroom. The prosecutor stood frozen, unprepared for this turn of events. Wilson's attorney looked between his client and the judge, confusion written on his face. Judge Winters finally found his voice. "This is absurd. I'll have you held in contempt, young man. This trial is now in recess." He banged his gavel hard, once, twice, 3 times, but no one moved. All eyes remained fixed on the judge, whose hand now trembled slightly. A man in the back of the courtroom stood up. "I'm Detective Powell with Internal Affairs," he announced, "and I think we need to continue this conversation down at the station, Your Honor." Andre's grandmother was now standing, tears streaming down her face. "My son told me," she called out. "He told me to make sure Andre was protected if anything happened. He told me about the judge." More voices joined in. The courtroom, silent just moments before, erupted into chaos. Through it all, Andre remained seated in the witness chair, his eyes never leaving Judge Winters. The truth had finally been spoken aloud. His father's voice, silenced 3 months ago, had finally been heard through his son. As officers approached the bench, Judge Winters seemed to collapse in on himself, the power and authority draining from his body. The man who had presided over countless trials now faced the prospect of his own. Andre felt a hand on his shoulder. It was the prosecutor. "Did you really find all that evidence?" she whispered. Andre nodded. "It's at my grandmother's house in a safe place, like Dad told me. He said if anything happened, I should wait for the right moment. He said I'd know when." As they led Judge Winters from the courtroom, Andre finally allowed himself to cry, not just for his father, but for the weight that had been on his small shoulders for these long months. The truth was out now, and though it wouldn't bring his father back, it would make sure that justice, real justice, would finally be served. The truth had come from the most unexpected witness, a 12-year-old boy who stood up to power and corruption, armed with nothing but the truth and love for his father. And a courtroom that had seen everything had finally seen something it had never witnessed before. The moment when justice found its true voice. 2 weeks before the courtroom confrontation, Andre sat cross-legged on the floor of his bedroom, surrounded by his father's belongings. His grandmother had finally given him permission to go through the boxes that had been sitting untouched in the corner since the funeral. "Don't stay up too late," his grandmother called from the hallway. "You still have school tomorrow." "I won't," Andre promised, though he had no intention of sleeping anytime soon. It had been almost 3 months since his father died. 3 months of questions with no answers. The police had called it a robbery gone wrong, his father in the wrong place at the wrong time. But Andre never believed that story. His father was too careful, too aware of his surroundings. And in the weeks before his death, he had been different, more secretive, making phone calls when he thought Andre was asleep. Andre opened the first box. It contained mostly clothes, his father's work uniforms and a few dress shirts for special occasions. The second box held paperwork. Bills, old tax returns, insurance documents. Nothing unusual. The third box was smaller than the others and had been taped shut more carefully. Andre peeled back the tape slowly. Inside, he found a leather folder he had never seen before, a small digital camera, and an envelope with "For Andre" written on it in his father's handwriting. Heart pounding, Andre opened the envelope first. Inside was a letter. "Son, if you're reading this, something has happened to me. I hope I'm wrong. But I've learned some things at work that could put me in danger. I've been collecting evidence of something bad happening at the courthouse, where I've been working on the maintenance crew. Judge Winters and some businessmen in town have been breaking the law. I have proof. If something happens to me, wait until the right moment, then make sure the truth comes out. You'll know when. I love you, Dad." Andre read the letter 3 times, his hands trembling. He then turned to the leather folder. Inside were photographs, documents, and what looked like bank statements. The first photo showed his father standing next to a man Andre recognized immediately as Judge Winters, the same judge who was now presiding over the murder trial of Richard Wilson, the businessman accused of killing his father. They were standing in front of a cabin in the woods, both holding fishing rods. His father wasn't smiling. The next several photos were taken from a distance, showing Judge Winters meeting with different men in parking lots and outside restaurants. One of the men was Richard Wilson. Another photo showed money changing hands. The bank statements were copies of deposits into an account with Judge Winters's name, large sums always deposited right after certain court cases concluded. Andre felt sick. His father had uncovered corruption, a judge taking bribes to rule in favor of certain people. And now that same judge was overseeing the trial of the man accused of killing his father. It was all connected. He carefully put everything back in the box and slid it under his bed. He couldn't tell anyone about this yet, not even his grandmother. The letter said to wait for the right moment. And he would. But now he had a purpose, a mission. He would make sure his father's discovery wasn't buried along with him. The next morning, Andre went to school as usual, but his mind was elsewhere. During lunch, he slipped into the school library and used a computer to search for information about Judge Harold Winters. The search results painted a picture of a respected jurist with 30 years on the bench, community service awards, charity golf tournaments, a clean record. But Andre knew better now. After school, he took a different bus route home, one that passed by the courthouse. He got off and walked to the building, trying to look like he belonged there. His father had worked in maintenance there for almost a year before his death. Andre had visited him at work a few times, so he knew the basic layout. The main lobby was busy with people coming and going. Andre spotted a familiar face, Ms. Chen from the records office. She had always been kind to him when he visited his father. "Andre, is that you?" she called when she spotted him. "My goodness, you've grown since I last saw you. How are you doing, honey?" "I'm okay," Andre said, trying to smile. I miss coming here sometimes, to see where Dad worked." Ms. Chen's face softened. "Oh, sweetie, we all miss him. He was always so helpful and kind." She lowered her voice. "Between you and me, the new maintenance guy doesn't fix anything right the first time." Andre managed a real smile at that. Dad always said, "Do it right or don't do it at all." That sounds like him. Ms. Chen checked her watch. "I'm heading to lunch. Would you like to join me? We could talk about your dad." Andre hesitated, then nodded. This might be his chance to gather more information without raising suspicions. Over sandwiches at a nearby cafe, Ms. Chen told stories about his father, how he would leave chocolate on her desk when she worked late, how he knew exactly how to fix the temperamental heating system in the records room. He was special, she said. Not just a maintenance worker, he noticed everything. "Did he ever mention anything strange happening at the courthouse?" Andre asked carefully. Ms. Chen tilted her head. "Strange how?" "I don't know, just things that didn't seem right to him." She was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Well, there was one thing. A few weeks before he died, he asked me some odd questions about case records, specifically cases presided over by Judge Winters, where the defendants were represented by the same law firm. He said he was just curious, but it seemed like more than that." Andre's pulse quickened. "Did he find anything?" "I don't know, honey. He never mentioned it again." She frowned slightly. "But now that you mention it, he was acting different those last few weeks. More serious, less joking around." After lunch, Ms. Chen took Andre back to the courthouse and let him sit in her office while she worked. He could see Judge Winters's courtroom from her window, the same courtroom where Wilson's trial was taking place. "Judge Winters is hearing that big murder case now," Ms. Chen commented. "The businessman accused of killing a maintenance worker." She didn't seem to make the connection that the victim was Andre's father. "What do people think of Judge Winters?" Andre asked, trying to sound casual. "Oh, he's very respected. Tough but fair, they say." She lowered her voice again. "Though between us, I've always found him a bit cold, and his clerk seems afraid of him, which has always struck me as odd." Andre filed this information away. "Where's his office?" "Third floor, east wing, but it's restricted access. You need a key card." She studied Andre more closely now. "Why are you so interested in Judge Winters?" Andre shrugged. "Just curious about where Dad worked, that's all." That evening, Andre returned home with his mind racing. He needed more information, but he had to be careful. If the judge and Wilson really were involved in his father's death, they were dangerous people. Over the next week, Andre developed a routine. After school, he would go to the courthouse and chat with Ms. Chen or other staff who had known his father. He collected bits and pieces of information, building a clearer picture of what his father might have discovered. He learned that in the past year, Judge Winters had presided over 6 cases involving clients of the same law firm. All 6 defendants were wealthy businessmen. All 6 had been acquitted or received unusually light sentences. One of those businessmen was Richard Wilson, 8 months ago, in a fraud case. Andre also discovered that his father had been assigned to clean Judge Winters's chambers during the evenings in the months before his death, something that wasn't part of the regular maintenance rotation. At home, Andre studied the evidence in his father's box more carefully. The bank statements showed deposits ranging from $50,000 to $200,000, all made within days of suspicious case rulings. There were notes in his father's handwriting tracking the dates of cases, rulings, and deposits. He had been building a case methodically, carefully, and then there was the cabin. Andre found more photos of the hunting lodge where his father had been pictured with Judge Winters. In one photo, partially hidden behind a tree, was Richard Wilson. The 3 men had some connection beyond the courthouse. Andre needed to know more about that cabin. On the back of one photo, his father had written, "Riverstone Hunting Lodge, Oakwood County." Using the school library computer again, Andre searched for information about the lodge. It was an exclusive members-only retreat about 2 hours outside the city. Memberships cost thousands of dollars a year, far more than his father could have afforded on a maintenance worker's salary. So why was his father there? And why was he photographed with Judge Winters? 10 days after finding the box, Andre got a crucial piece of information. He overheard 2 clerks talking in the courthouse hallway. "Did you know that maintenance worker who was killed used to be a cop?" one said. "No way," the other replied. "Yep, He left the force a few years ago. Something about disagreeing with how an investigation was handled. Went completely off the grid for a while, then showed up here as a janitor of all things. Weird career change, right? Andre froze. His father had never told him he was once a police officer. As far as Andre knew, his father had always worked maintenance jobs. This changed everything. That night, Andre searched through more of his father's belongings and found an old photo album he'd never seen before. In it were pictures of his father in a police uniform, looking younger and prouder. There was a certificate of commendation and newspaper clippings about cases he had solved. The final clipping, dated 5 years ago, was about a corruption investigation that had been suddenly closed with no charges filed. His father was mentioned as the lead detective. The pieces were falling into place. His father hadn't randomly discovered corruption at the courthouse. He had been investigating it all along. He had taken the maintenance job as a cover to gather evidence against Judge Winters and his network, and they had killed him for it. 2 days before the trial was set to conclude, Andre made his decision. He gathered the most damning evidence from his father's box: the photos of Judge Winters with Wilson, the bank statements, his father's notes, and put them in his backpack. His grandmother noticed his serious expression at breakfast. "What's on your mind, child?" "I'm going to testify at the trial tomorrow about Dad." Her eyes widened. "The prosecutor didn't tell me this." "They don't know yet," Andre admitted. "But I have to, Grandma, for Dad." She studied him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Your father always said you had his sense of justice. Strong and unbending." She reached across the table and took his hand. "Whatever you're planning, be careful. The people who hurt your father are still out there." "I know," Andre said. "That's why I have to do this." The next morning, as Andre prepared to leave for court with his grandmother, he took one last look at his father's letter. "Wait until the right moment," it said. "You'll know when." Andre did know. The moment would be today in court, when he would look Judge Winters in the eye and speak the truth his father had died to protect. "I'm ready," he told his grandmother, the evidence secure in his backpack. Together they headed to the courthouse, where justice had been corrupted but might yet be restored. Detective René Torres couldn't get the image out of her head. A small boy standing tall in that witness stand, pointing his finger at one of the most powerful men in the city. "You're the killer," he had said to Judge Winters. And the courtroom had gone so quiet, you could hear the old building settling on its foundation. She had been in the back of the courtroom that day, not officially assigned to the case, but drawn by curiosity about Wilson's trial. What she witnessed changed everything. 3 days had passed since that moment. Judge Winters had been temporarily removed from the bench pending investigation. Richard Wilson's trial had been declared a mistrial and was now on hold. And Renee had been unofficially tasked with looking into the boy's claims by her boss, Lieutenant Franklin. "Keep this quiet," Franklin had told her. "Winters has friends in high places, including our department. I can give you 2 weeks, but that's it. And if anyone asks, you're clearing up paperwork on old cases." Renee sat at her desk now, staring at a photo of Andre and his father, taken at a park, the father's arm around his son's shoulders, both smiling. It had been taken just 6 months before the murder. The official case file labeled the death a robbery gone wrong. David Thompson had been found in the parking garage of Wilson's office building with a gunshot wound to the chest. His wallet and watch were missing, open and shut, according to the detectives who investigated. Except it wasn't, not if what Andre said was true. Renee picked up her phone and dialed the number for Andre's grandmother. "Mrs. Thompson, this is Detective Torres. I was wondering if I could speak with Andre about what happened in court." There was a pause. "He's been through a lot." "I understand," Renee said, "but I believe him, and I want to help. If what he said is true, I need to see the evidence he mentioned." Another pause. "Come by after dinner, around 7, but I'll be sitting in on any conversation you have with my grandson." "Of course," Renee agreed. The Thompson home was in a modest apartment complex on the east side of the city. Renee parked her unmarked car and took a moment to observe her surroundings. Nothing unusual, but she couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. Andre's grandmother answered the door, her expression cautious but determined. "Detective," she said with a nod, stepping back to let Renee in. Andre sat on the couch in the small living room, his back straight and his eyes alert. He looked both older and younger than his 12 years. The innocence of childhood marked by a seriousness no kid should have to carry. "Hello, Andre," Renee said, sitting across from him. "I was in the courtroom when you testified." "Are you here to arrest the judge?" Andre asked directly. Renee shook her head. "Not yet. First, I need to see what evidence you have. Can you show me?" Andre looked at his grandmother, who nodded. He disappeared into his bedroom and returned with a shoebox. "My dad left this for me," he explained, placing it on the coffee table. He knew something might happen to him. Renee opened the box carefully. Inside were photographs, bank statements, and handwritten notes, just as Andre had described in court. She lifted one of the photos showing Judge Winters and David Thompson at what appeared to be a hunting lodge. "Your father was a police officer," Renee said. Not a question, but a statement. Andre nodded. "I didn't know until after he died. He never told me. He left the force 5 years ago," his grandmother added. "Said he couldn't be part of a system that protected the guilty because they had money or power." Renee examined the bank statements, large deposits into an account under Harold Winters' name, all corresponding with dates of case dismissals or light sentences. "This is serious evidence," Renee said. "May I take photos of these documents?" "Take the originals," Andre's grandmother said. "We made copies." Smart, Renee thought. "Did your father leave anything else? Any recordings or digital files?" Andre hesitated. "There's one more thing." He went back to his room and returned with a small voice recorder. "I haven't listened to it yet. I was scared to." Renee took the recorder gently. "Should we listen together?" Andre nodded, his face solemn. Renee pressed play. David Thompson's voice filled the small room, causing Andre to stiffen beside his grandmother. "This is Detective David Thompson, former badge number 4573. Date is April 12th. This is my 4th meeting with Judge Harold Winters at Riverstone Lodge. He believes I'm just the maintenance worker from the courthouse, but I've been gathering evidence of judicial corruption for the past 8 months. There was a pause, then the sound of a door opening and closing. "David, right on time," came another voice, undoubtedly Judge Winters. "Wilson will be joining us shortly." "Yes, Your Honor," David replied, his voice different now, less confident, more deferential. "Drop the formalities. We're not in court now." The recording continued, capturing a conversation about fishing and hunting before turning to more serious matters. "The Wilson problem," Judge Winters said. "It's becoming complicated." "The fraud case?" David asked. "No, that's handled. I made sure of it." The judge's voice lowered. "It's this new issue. Someone's been looking into our arrangement, requesting records, asking questions." "That sounds concerning," David said carefully. "More than concerning. It's dangerous for all of us. Wilson thinks it might be someone inside the courthouse. Maintenance has access everywhere, sees everything. You haven't noticed anything unusual, have you?" "No, sir," David replied. "Nothing. Keep your eyes open. If there's a leak, we need to plug it, permanently." The recording ended there. The room was silent for a long moment. "He knew," Andre said quietly. "Dad knew they were onto him." Renee nodded slowly. "And he was still gathering evidence. He was brave, Andre, very brave." "Will this be enough?" Andre's grandmother asked. "To arrest the judge and Wilson?" "It's a start," Renee said. "But we'll need more to make charges stick against people this powerful." The next morning, Renee began digging deeper. She pulled court records for all cases presided over by Judge Winters in the past 5 years, focusing on those where Richard Wilson or his associates were defendants. The pattern was clear once you knew to look for it. 12 cases, all with the same outcome: dismissals, acquittals, or sentences well below guidelines. In each case, the court reporter was the same: Lydia Barnes. Renee found Lydia in the courthouse cafeteria, sitting alone with a cup of coffee and a half-eaten muffin. "Ms. Barnes? I'm Detective Torres. Could I speak with you for a moment? What about Judge Winters? Lydia asked, eyes wary. Her hand trembled slightly, coffee spilling onto the table. I think you know more than what happened in open court, Renee said, sliding into the seat across from her. You were the court reporter for all 12 cases where Wilson or his associates appeared before Judge Winters. That's just a coincidence, Lydia said, her face paling. Is it? Or did Winters specifically request you because he knew you wouldn't ask questions? You don't understand, Lydia whispered. These people, they're dangerous. I know, Renee said. They killed David Thompson when he got too close. Lydia's eyes widened. The maintenance worker, that was connected? Renee nodded. His son had evidence. Photos, bank records, a recording. Winters and Wilson were working together, fixing cases for money. Thompson discovered it, and they killed him for it. Oh God, Lydia said, a hand over her mouth. I knew something wasn't right, but I never thought... She looked around nervously. I can't talk here. Meet me after work. The coffee shop on Elm, 6 o'clock. But Lydia never showed up at the coffee shop. When she was 2 hours late, Renee drove to her address on file. The apartment door was ajar, and Renee drew her weapon before entering. The place had been ransacked, furniture overturned, drawers emptied, but no Lydia. Renee called for backup and began searching the apartment. In the bathroom, tucked into the back of a drawer under some towels, she found a thumb drive labeled Insurance. Back at the station, with Lieutenant Franklin watching over her shoulder, Renee plugged in the drive. It contained audio files, dozens of them, recorded in Judge Winters's chambers after official court proceedings had ended. In one recording, Judge Winters could be heard clearly discussing with Richard Wilson how to handle David Thompson. He knows too much, Wilson said. My security guy spotted him taking photos outside the lodge. Are you sure it's him? Winters asked. Positive. And get this, he's ex-police. He's been playing us the whole time, working as a janitor to spy on us. Christ, Winters muttered. How did we miss that? Doesn't matter now. We need to deal with him. Not in my courthouse, Winters said firmly. No, of course not. I'll take care of it. Make it look like a robbery, but we need to know how much he shared and with whom. His kid, Winters said after a pause. He's got a son. The boy visits him here sometimes. Then we watch the kid too, Wilson replied. Make sure he doesn't have anything. Lieutenant Franklin's face had gone gray as they listened. Jesus, he whispered when the recording ended. We need to move on this now. Within hours, a warrant was issued for both Judge Winters and Richard Wilson. Wilson was already in custody from the previous charges, but Winters had to be located. They found him at his lake house, attempting to board his boat with a suitcase full of cash and a fake passport. The arrest made headlines across the city. Judge arrested for corruption and murder conspiracy. The photo of Winters being led away in handcuffs appeared on every news channel. Andre and his grandmother watched the coverage from their living room, Andre's expression solemn but relieved. Dad did it, he said quietly. He got them. His grandmother squeezed his shoulder. You both did. The investigation expanded rapidly. 4 other businessmen were implicated in the bribery scheme. 2 other judges came under scrutiny. The police department itself was being reviewed for possible complicity in covering up evidence. A week after Winters' arrest, Renee visited Andre again. I wanted to tell you personally, she said, sitting across from him. Wilson has agreed to testify against Winters in exchange for a lesser sentence. He's admitted to arranging your father's murder on Winters' orders. Andre nodded, processing this. What happens now? There will be a trial, a fair one this time, and you'll probably need to testify again. I will, Andre said without hesitation. Whatever it takes. Your father would be very proud of you, Renee said. What you did took incredible courage. Andre looked down at a photo of his father on the coffee table. He always told me that the truth matters more than anything, even when it's hard, even when it's dangerous. He was right, Renee agreed, and because of both of you, a lot of corrupt people are going to face justice. As she left the Thompson apartment that evening, Renee reflected on how a single moment of courage, a 12-year-old boy standing up in a crowded courtroom and speaking truth to power, had cracked open a case that might otherwise have remained buried forever. The system wasn't perfect. Power still corrupted, money still influenced. But sometimes, just sometimes, the truth found its voice, and that voice could change everything. The threats began 3 days after Judge Winters's arrest. First, it was strange cars parked outside their apartment building. Then came the phone calls. Silence on the other end when Andre or his grandmother answered. "We should stay with my sister for a while," his grandmother suggested one evening after another hang-up call. "Just until things settle down." Andre shook his head firmly. "Dad wouldn't run, neither will we." His grandmother sighed, worry etched across her face. "Your father was a grown man, Andre. You're 12 years old." "I'm not scared," Andre insisted, though this wasn't entirely true. He was scared, but he was also determined. He had come too far to back down now. Detective Torres increased patrol cars in their neighborhood and had an officer stationed outside their building at night. It helped, but the feeling of being watched remained. At school, Andre became something of a celebrity. Kids who had never spoken to him before suddenly wanted to sit with him at lunch, asking questions about the judge and the trial. Teachers looked at him differently, too. Some with admiration, others with concern. "You doing okay?" his English teacher, Mr. Reed, asked one day after class. "That's a lot for anyone to handle, let alone someone your age." "I'm fine," Andre said. Mr. Reed studied him thoughtfully. "You know, when I was about your age, I testified in a case against my uncle. He had done some bad things, and I was the only witness. It was the hardest thing I've ever done." "What happened?" Andre asked, surprised. "He went to prison. My aunt never spoke to our family again. Some people said I should have kept quiet to protect the family." Mr. Reed leaned against his desk. "But I've never regretted telling the truth. Some burdens are heavier than others, but the burden of hiding the truth is the heaviest of all." Andre thought about this as he walked home that afternoon. He had been carrying his father's secret for weeks. The evidence, the conspiracy, the corruption. Speaking out in court had lifted some of that weight, but not all of it. There was still so much to be done. At home, he found Detective Torres waiting with his grandmother. "What happened?" Andre asked immediately, sensing something was wrong. "Lydia Barnes," Torres said. "The court reporter I told you about. She's been found." "Is she?" Andre couldn't finish the question. "She's alive," Torres assured him quickly. "But she was badly beaten and left in a parking garage, the same one where your father was killed. It's a message." Andre's grandmother covered her mouth with her hand. "Dear Lord, we need to move you both to a safe house," Torres continued. "Tonight. Pack only what you need." This time, even Andre didn't argue. The safe house was a small cabin on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by woods on 3 sides. 2 officers were assigned to guard them around the clock. "How long do we stay here?" Andre asked as they settled in that first night. "Until the preliminary hearing," Torres explained. "We need your testimony to move forward with charges against Winters and his accomplices." "When is the hearing?" 2 weeks from now. We're building the strongest case we can. Lydia Barnes has agreed to testify too. Despite what happened to her, she's being kept in a separate location. For the next 2 weeks, Andre and his grandmother lived in a strange limbo. They couldn't leave the cabin. They had no internet access and limited phone contact with the outside world. To pass the time, Andre read books his grandmother had packed and played chess with the officers. Detective Torres visited every few days, bringing updates on the case. "We've connected Winters to 5 more cases where he received bribes," she told them during one visit. "And we found offshore accounts with over $3 million. The money trail leads back to Wilson and several other businessmen in the city." "What about the other people who worked with them?" Andre asked. "The ones who helped cover everything up." "We're working on that too," Torres said grimly. 2 officers from our department have been suspended pending investigation, and Wilson has started naming names in exchange for a deal." "He doesn't deserve a deal," Andre said sharply. "He killed my dad." "I know," Torres said gently. "But his testimony will help us catch everyone involved. Sometimes we have to make tough choices to get justice for everyone." Andre didn't like it, but he understood. His father had made a similar choice, working undercover instead of confronting the corruption directly. Sometimes the path to justice wasn't straight. The night before the preliminary hearing, Andre couldn't sleep. He sat by the window of the cabin, staring out into the darkness. One of the officers, noticing him awake, came to sit nearby. "Nervous about tomorrow?" the officer asked. Andre nodded. "That's normal," the officer said. "But remember, you've already done the hardest part. You stood up in that courtroom and told the truth when everyone expected you to stay quiet. Everything else is just following through." "My dad was investigating for months," Andre said. "He was careful, planned everything. I just blurted it out in court." "Sometimes that's how the truth comes out," the officer replied. "Not carefully planned, but straight from the heart when it can't be contained anymore." The next morning, they were escorted to the courthouse in an unmarked police car with tinted windows. They entered through a back entrance, avoiding the crowd of reporters gathered at the front steps. The courtroom was different this time, smaller with fewer spectators. This was just a preliminary hearing to determine if there was enough evidence to proceed to trial. Andre spotted Richard Wilson sitting with his lawyers. The businessman looked thinner, his expensive suit hanging loosely on his frame, dark circles under his eyes. When he noticed Andre looking at him, he quickly turned away. Judge Winters was brought in next, handcuffed and wearing an orange jumpsuit instead of judicial robes. The transformation was shocking. His face was haggard, his silver hair unkempt. The power and authority that had once radiated from him were gone, replaced by a desperate sort of fury. For a moment his eyes met Andre's across the room. There was no remorse there, only cold hatred. Andre held his gaze, refusing to look away first. Eventually, Winters broke eye contact, muttering something to his lawyer. The new judge, a woman named Harriet Cho, entered the courtroom. Everyone rose. "Be seated," she said. "We're here today for the preliminary hearing in the case of the state versus Harold Winters and Richard Wilson. The charges include murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, judicial corruption, obstruction of justice, and bribery." One by one, witnesses were called. Detective Torres presented the evidence found in Andre's father's box and Lydia Barnes's recordings. Forensic accountants testified about the money trail. A ballistics expert confirmed that the gun found in Wilson's office safe matched the bullet that killed Andre's father. And then it was Andre's turn. As he took the stand, he felt a strange calm settle over him. This time he wasn't acting on impulse. He knew exactly what he needed to say and why. "Mr. Thompson," the prosecutor began, "please tell the court how you came into possession of the evidence against Judge Winters and Mr. Wilson." Andre spoke clearly, describing how his father had left the box for him. The letter explaining that if anything happened, Andre should make sure the truth came out. "My dad was a police officer before he worked maintenance," Andre explained. "He left the force because he saw corruption there too. He took the job at the courthouse because he heard rumors about Judge Winters taking bribes. He wanted to gather evidence." "And he confided all this to you?" the prosecutor asked. "Not while he was alive," Andre admitted. "I think he was trying to protect me, but he left everything I needed to understand after he was gone." When it was the defense attorney's turn to cross-examine, he tried to suggest that a 12-year-old couldn't possibly understand the complexities of what his father had discovered. "You expect us to believe that your father, a former detective, left crucial evidence of corruption with a child?" the attorney asked condescendingly. "He left it with his son," Andre corrected, his voice firm. "Someone he trusted, someone who would make sure the truth came out no matter what." "But how can we be sure these documents aren't forgeries? That you haven't misinterpreted innocent meetings and transactions?" "The recordings don't lie," Andre said simply. "Neither do the bank records, or the bullet that matches the gun in Mr. Wilson's safe, or Ms. Barnes's testimony about what she heard in Judge Winters's chambers." The defense attorney had no good response to this. After Andre stepped down, Lydia Barnes took the stand. Despite her recent injuries, a fading bruise still visible on her cheekbone, she spoke with clear determination. I was the court reporter for all the cases where Judge Winters ruled in favor of Wilson or his associates, she testified. I suspected something was wrong when I noticed the pattern, but I was afraid to speak up. After court sessions ended, I sometimes left my recording equipment running. I heard conversations I wasn't supposed to hear. What kind of conversations? The prosecutor asked. Discussions about payments, about which cases needed to be handled, and after David Thompson was killed, I heard them talking about it, not admitting to it outright, but discussing whether anyone would connect them to his death. Judge Cho listened to all the testimony without expression, taking careful notes. When the last witness had spoken, she reviewed her notes silently while the courtroom waited. Based on the evidence presented, she finally said, I find there is more than sufficient cause to proceed to trial. The defendants will remain in custody without bail, given the serious nature of the charges and the demonstrated willingness to interfere with witnesses. As Judge Winters was led away, he turned toward Andre once more. This isn't over, he said loudly enough for many to hear. An officer quickly pulled him toward the exit. Actually, Andre said to his grandmother as they watched Winters disappear through the door, I think it is over, at least his part in it. Outside the courthouse, Detective Torres escorted them to the car through a side entrance, avoiding the press. You did well in there, she told Andre. Your father would be proud. What happens now? Andre's grandmother asked. We keep building the case. The trial won't start for at least 6 months, and there are still people connected to Winters and Wilson that we need to investigate. More corrupt judges? Andre asked. Torres nodded. And police officers, lawyers, the network is extensive, so it's not really over, Andre said. The hardest part is, Torres assured him, Winters and Wilson will almost certainly be convicted based on the evidence we have. But cleaning up the entire system, that takes time. As they drove back to the safe house, Andre thought about his father. Not as he had last seen him, rushing off to work with a quick goodbye, but as he now understood him to have been. Brave, principled, dedicated to justice even when it put him in danger. I want to help, Andre said suddenly, with the rest of the investigation. Andre, you've already done more than enough, Torres replied, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. My dad gave his life for this, Andre insisted. He was trying to fix a broken system. I want to help finish what he started. His grandmother placed a hand on his arm. Andre, you're just a child. I'm the one who broke the case open, Andre reminded them. And I know things about my dad, where he went, who he talked to. That might help find more evidence. Torres and his grandmother exchanged looks. Let me think about it, Torres finally said. There might be some ways you can help that wouldn't put you at risk. That night at the safe house, Andre found himself unable to sleep again. He sat on the porch, watching fireflies blink in the darkness. One of the officers brought him a mug of hot chocolate and sat beside him. Big day, the officer commented. Andre nodded. You know, when I first joined the force, the officer said, I thought it was all about catching bad guys. But over the years, I've learned it's more about protecting good people. People like you and your dad. Did you know him when he was a cop? Andre asked. The officer shook his head. Before my time. But I've heard stories since this all came out. He was one of the good ones. I want to be like him someday, Andre said. Not necessarily a police officer, but someone who stands up for what's right. I'd say you're already there, the officer said. What you did in that courtroom, calling out a corrupt judge to his face, took more courage than most adults ever show. For the first time in a long time, Andre felt a sense of peace. The road ahead was still uncertain. The trial would be difficult. The threats might continue. But he had done what his father asked. He had made sure the truth came out. As he finished his hot chocolate and headed back inside, Andre paused in the doorway. Do you think they'll all go to prison? Winters, Wilson, all of them? Justice isn't perfect, the officer said, considering. But with the evidence we have, and with witnesses like you and Ms. Barnes, I'd say their chances of walking free are about 0. Andre nodded, satisfied. Good, because my dad deserves justice, and so do all the other people they hurt. The courthouse looked different today. Andre stood at the bottom of the wide stone steps, gazing up at the building where 18 months earlier he had spoken 4 words that changed everything. "You're the killer." He was 14 now, taller, his voice deeper, but the memory of that day remained crystal clear. His grandmother stood beside him, her hand resting lightly on his shoulder. "You ready?" she asked. Andre nodded. Today was the final sentencing for Judge Harold Winters, following a trial that had captivated the city for months. Richard Wilson had already been sentenced, 30 years without possibility of parole, for his role in the murder of David Thompson and the corruption scheme. Inside, the courthouse buzzed with activity. People nodded respectfully as Andre passed. Some he recognized from the trial, others from the news coverage that had followed the case. His story, the boy who brought down a corrupt judge, had spread far beyond their city. Detective Torres was waiting for them outside the courtroom. "Big day," she said, giving Andre a brief hug. Over the past year and a half, she had become something of a mentor to him, checking in regularly, helping him understand the legal process as the case worked its way through the system. "Will he actually get life?" Andre asked. The prosecution had recommended a life sentence, but there were never guarantees. "If there's any justice in the world," Torres replied. "The jury convicted him on all counts. The evidence was overwhelming." They entered the courtroom together. It was packed, with reporters filling the back rows. Judge Cho was presiding, as she had throughout the trial. The doors at the side of the courtroom opened, and Harold Winters was led in. He was thinner than Andre remembered, his once silver hair now completely white. Prison had aged him rapidly. He wore handcuffs and an orange jumpsuit, a far cry from the judicial robes that had once given him an air of untouchable authority. For a moment, his eyes met Andre's across the room. There was no longer hatred there, just a hollow resignation. Judge Cho called the court to order. "We're here today for the sentencing of Harold Winters, former judge of this court, convicted of first-degree murder, conspiracy, judicial corruption, and obstruction of justice." She turned to Winters. "Before I pronounce sentence, you have the right to address the court. Do you wish to do so?" Winters rose slowly. For a long moment he said nothing, his eyes scanning the courtroom. Then he spoke, his voice rough from disuse. "I have served this court for 35 years. I have presided over thousands of cases. You have betrayed the trust placed in you," Judge Cho interrupted, her voice sharp. "You have corrupted the very system you swore to uphold. This is not the time for self-justification, Mr. Winters. It is a time for remorse, if you have any." Winters's jaw tightened. "I have nothing more to say," he said, sitting back down. Judge Cho nodded. "Then I am ready to pronounce sentence." She turned to face Winters directly. Justice doesn't arrive with a single verdict. It arrives as a practice. Messy, stubborn, human. A father chose the long road, trading comfort for truth. A son finished the walk, not with power or credentials, but with courage and a box under a bed. A detective listened when it was safer not to. A community built guardrails so the same fall wouldn't happen twice. That's the moral here. Systems bend toward whoever pushes hardest. For years, corruption pressed down. Then ordinary people pressed back, patiently, publicly, together. If you carry anything from Andre's story, let it be this. Truth needs voices, not titles. When your moment comes, at work, at school, in a room where silence feels expected, speak. Stand up for the person who can't. Ask for the evidence. Demand the light. Justice is not an event we watch. It's a habit we practice, one brave word at a time.